I was like central casting.
Central, hey, you know what? And he's central casting. Look at that guy, central casting.
And these are central casting. If I'm doing a movie, I pick you, General.
Central casting.
Very impressive. Oh, you're central casting. Look at this guy. Oh, this man's central casting. I watch him all the time. Central casting. He's a real talent, a real guy, and he is central casting. Do we agree? Central casting.
They're central casting, the red suspenders, handsome, beautiful, smart. You couldn't get better central casting.
He is great in every way, and he's central casting. I mean, this is a man that was born for the position.
Though he was central casting like the perfect Supreme Court judge. These guys are central casting. There's nobody in Hollywood that looks like these people. And they're central casting. I've never seen a group of people like this. Everyone's in perfect shape.
My friend, central casting. I always call him central casting. Boy, is that central casting. That's Tabitha.
Does he look like central casting?
These guys are central casting, like from a movie.
Central casting. You can't cast anybody. You don't have anybody in Hollywood that looks like these guys.
And a great-looking central casting, and we have great generals, a great central casting general. Look at that.
Ne kadar güzel insanlar.
Central casting.
Onlarla ilişki kurmak ne kadar.
He's like central casting for ownership of a hotel.
And everyone is central casting. Central casting. Glasses, head, boom. I watch Judge Kavanaugh, who's central casting.
This guy's like central casting. You couldn't pick a better guy in Hollywood. There's no actor that could do it better.
You are so central casting. Great marks, great schools, the best everything, the best of everything. Your family, your wife, your children, you don't have a problem in the world. You are the greatest.
Good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Gosh, it feels like Thursday. I seriously thought it was Thursday until a couple minutes ago. Good morning, Karen. I'm Tabitha Hassell with Tabs on Tap. I am telling you, for being a Tuesday, it's been a really long week. And I am so tired today. My son is obsessed with vehicles, to say the least. And last night he was supposed to have a vehicle delivered, and it was kind of late at night. 9 o'clock, 9:30. I was actually getting ready for bed. And I was already done with all my work for the day, getting ready to go to bed. And he comes in and he's like, this car, the guy who was delivering the car, their truck wasn't running well and they couldn't deliver it. So I've got to go pick it up. And of course, the mom that I am, I worried. I'm like, I am not going to worry while he drives to pick this, car up. So I drove with him to Terre Haute, Indiana last night and didn't get home till early this morning. So if I'm a little off, which I normally am, even without an excuse, but you'll know why. It was a long night. He's been up all night long working on this car. I told him, you have to go to bed. You have to work today. Go get some sleep. And so it's been a long morning. I realized this morning that my niece's cat must have got out yesterday. This cat has never been outside before. I'm really hoping we can find it today. I don't know how it got out, but it was not in the house this morning. So it's going to be a little bit of a crazy day today. I will be here tomorrow. Hopefully Colonel Joe Adams will be joining us with the Washington Guard, but I will not be here Thursday, and I'm not positive about Friday. And the reason why is because, as some of you know, I work in anti-piracy, and sometimes I get these last minute work orders that include travel. So I'll be working in Springfield, Missouri. Wednesday, I'll be leaving after the show, and I'm not sure if I'll be back late Thursday because I don't get off work until really late, or will I be back on sometime Friday. So sometimes I just drive through the night and then I'm fine, but we'll see how it plays out. I have no doubt there's going to be a lot to talk about this week. No question about it. Lots to talk about. I know yesterday we ended on time for once, for the first time in a long time, so that we could all go out and see Donald Trump talk. And I was kind of surprised that it took so long for them to start. I don't know why in my head I was thinking, they're going to be right on the dot. We're going to find out right away. And we're going to get into all of those details. Why? I mean, I consider it martial law. Some people do, some people don't. What's going on in Washington, D.C.? We're going to hear some words from of course, Miss Maxwell, Maxine, I'm sorry, Waters. We're going to talk about delay Maxwell, of course, and talk a little bit more about those leaks. Lots of other stuff going on today. Obviously, we know Donald Trump is going to be meeting with Putin in Alaska. This is a really big deal, quite honestly, for Donald Trump to be meeting with Putin in Alaska. And the reason why is because generally, if we want to meet with Putin, we have to go to Russia or to a third party, another country, let's say Qatar, something along those lines, because we generally will not see Putin step foot into the United States. It's a huge risk for him because he is, of course, considered the enemy. Again, old Cold War propaganda, but that is how a lot of Americans feel. And of course, Alaska is only, what is it, 2.5 miles from Russia? Something along those lines. Well, one of the Alaskan islands, not necessarily where they're going to be meeting, but it's a very close point, very near to Russia. So not much of a trip from Moscow over to Alaska, of course. Good morning, Rob. And so that's pretty interesting. And of course, if you heard Donald Trump's statements about that meeting, and this, I can promise you now, it's probably not going to go anywhere unless they replace Zelensky. It's probably not going anywhere because if you heard Donald Trump's statements, he said that Zelensky is not invited to the meeting. He's not going to attend that meeting. And should he, shouldn't he? I mean, maybe it would be great if they could all sit down together. But I think that Putin recognizes that Zelensky is nothing but a puppet. He's an actor, excuse me, just like central casting that I played coming into the show. He is nothing but an actor. It's a puppet government. The entire world recognizes that. And that's exactly why Zelensky does not have a seat at the table. Now, allegedly, the European Union, some folks in NATO, the leaders, of course, of the UK and so on, they think that Zelensky does need to be there. Why? I guess they want to carry on that facade. So we'll see. They may demand that he is allowed to attend the meeting. Good morning, Sherry. And so we'll see how that plays out. But, as we have said many, many times, that Russia will and has always said that they will absolutely agree to a ceasefire and they will absolutely withdraw, their forces in many of these areas under the agreement that they get to keep the land that they have seized already. And of course, Zelensky has always said that's not going to happen. They're not going to get 1 inch, of Ukrainian land. So I don't see a easy agreement here. I really don't. And quite honestly, it's not Zelensky making these decisions. He's just the little puppet announcer. But really, of course, we know it is his masters. I am so sorry. I hope I don't cough through the whole show. I was up coughing all night. Last night on our drive back, I lost my voice. So hopefully I can get through the show today because I don't have a ton of videos to play. So we're going to be doing a lot of talking. It's going to be a tough morning trying to talk, to say the least. But either way, we'll see how all that plays out. I don't expect anything unless the puppet masters agree to the ceasefire. I don't see that ceasefire happening. But I definitely do want to talk about what's going on in Washington, D.C., because it is a really big deal. And I consider it martial law because obviously federal authorities are in charge. Of course, we know there's going to be the DC National Guard who are going to be patrolling. To Colonel Joe Adams' statement yesterday, I still don't know in what capacity fully the National Guard will be deployed. I'm going to guess it's just like a peacekeeping mission where they're going to be there as a deterrent, as a show of force. But they've done a great job, I think, getting federal law enforcement to respond. And it's kind of funny because there's so much speculation out there. We talked a little bit about this yesterday. So much speculation. So many people do think that the reason why all this is happening is to prepare for indictments. And, we're going to talk about Schiff, Adam Schiff, here in just a little while, because he's probably going to be the first head to roll the way things are playing out. And it's kind of interesting, the local St. Louis connection, which is even more interesting with the witness. And so now I'm kind of wondering, if we tie all this together with that hack, I'm wondering, is that hack really to uncover, again, we touched base on this yesterday, some of these federal witnesses. Now, yesterday when we had the show, I didn't know the situation about Schiff until after the show. And so I'm thinking, wait a minute, We know that there was a hacking into the Supreme Court system. And we know that the hackers could, we don't know for sure, they could have gained access to the witness list. A lot of these witnesses, of course, they're whistleblowers. A lot of them are witnesses, secret witnesses that no one knows their identity. Is it possible that the shadow government, the cabal, whatever you want to call them, are behind the hacking? And in doing so, maybe they've uncovered who these different federal witnesses are. And good morning, Linda. It's kind of interesting. I'm going to read in a few minutes the whistleblower statement that we saw. But first, I want to talk again about a little bit more about Washington, D.C. What's interesting about Donald Trump's statements, if you watched his conference, is that, again, just like we talked about on the show yesterday, this is just the beginning. He recognizes the problem we have in this country. And I'm so glad to hear us going back to America first and not worrying about, well, of course, he's still working on these peace deals with these other countries, but I want to talk about what's going on with America first. Sorry, I don't know if I'll be able to talk today or not, but I'm going to really try. We've got to worry about crime. We've got to worry about homelessness. We have to worry about all of these things happening right here in our own country, on our own land. And I think this is a great start. Do I wish it started at the same time in other areas? Absolutely. But we've got to get the nation's capital secured. And, it's always been a big tourist area. I was there, a few times in the past as a kid. And, we all should have that opportunity to be able to go to our nation's capital and not worry about getting mugged or carjacked or God knows what else. And I read yesterday, and I don't know if these numbers are true or could be true. I guess it's possible that there was almost 4,000 homeless people in Washington, D.C. Now, can that possibly be true? That doesn't seem right. But those are some numbers I read. I don't see how that could honestly be true. And if it is, I understand why it's a problem. Now, they've already removed all of these homeless folks. They did that before his conference yesterday. I was not aware of that. I thought it was an initiative they were getting ready to start. But by the time that Donald Trump made that conference, they had already removed the homeless encampments and the homeless folks, sleeping on the street. Now, I have still not heard, maybe you have, where they took them. I have no idea. Did they just escort them outside of, the limits of Washington, D.C.? Did they make sure they had, shelter or take them, somewhere? If it was really, truly almost 4,000 people, that's a lot of people. I don't know where they would have gone. It's always a situation when it comes to the homeless. It's a tough situation to solve. And where do you put people? You can't force people necessarily. Now, you will be able to soon force people to get certain types of health. That's a executive order that Donald Trump has written, but I don't believe it's yet come into effect, where you can take somebody who is having some mental health issues or drug issues, and you can force them into some type of program. Now, you couldn't do that in the past, but that is something that we'll be doing soon. And again, that goes back to America first. How do we make our city streets safe? People want to say, you see these videos and you see these people, particularly, let's say in Los Angeles, where there's blocks and blocks of people who have taken tranquilizers. They can't even stand up straight. It permanently alters their spine, where they're completely doubled over. And these poor people are suffering. They're out there wandering around. You see blocks and blocks of people, on drugs, passed out, all these different states of consciousness. And there should be a way that we can help these people, or at least put them somewhere where they're for their own safety. And I know that is something Donald Trump is working on. And I haven't really heard it talked about a lot. Even on the liberal channels, I haven't heard, because, they wouldn't like that, because they want criminals, and drug addicts and drug dealers to be free and to live how they want to live, of course. But because, of course, that they don't care, do they? Because they're not paying for it. We are. Our tax dollars are paying for those folks. So I don't know where these people went. But what's interesting is Maxine Waters, of course, is of course saying that it's civil war. And it's so funny, because while she's talking about this situation, you can hear all the sirens in the background. It's one of the funniest videos I've seen in a long time. So I'm going to play that for you very quickly here. And it's very short, but it's absolutely hilarious.
Mean nothing. Actions mean everything. Watch this. Watch it very closely. Ask a lot of questions. Focus those cameras on everything that's going on. because this president is trying to lead us into what could be called a civil war.
Oh, we all know she's a joke anyway, don't we? Here she is talking about Donald Trump trying to lead us into a civil war by, of course, and there's and of course, that's not what he's trying to do, but it's an old law, and it is called the 1973 Home Rule Act, and it gives direct federal authority over the area of Washington, D.C. But that can be in any area. It doesn't have to be necessarily Washington, D.C. But while she's talking about civil war, you hear all the sirens in the background because of all the crime that takes place. Pam says not one president or anyone else has ever addressed homelessness. Thank you, Donald Trump. Exactly, Pam. I love it. I talked a little bit about it. I don't know if it was last week or the week before, a little bit more about that executive order. And you know what? We'll talk about it again soon. I don't know again what my timeline is going to be tomorrow or the rest of this week, but we'll talk about it again soon and break that down, because it is kind of and I don't want to go off on a side tangent on it, but it is a very important legislation that Donald Trump is working on because so many people I know have dealt with situations where they've had children or family members or neighbors or somebody in their community that is suffering from some type of mental health situation. And not that all homeless people, of course, have mental health or drug addictions, but we know that many of them, if not the majority, do. And so therefore, most people have never been able to tackle this situation because those people have rights, and you cannot violate their rights. You cannot hold them for longer than, let's say, 72 hours if they're a harm to themselves or something along those lines. And so now that's going to change to where if it is your family member or your friend or somebody in your community, someone is going to be able to say, hey, this person needs help. They cannot recognize themselves that they need help. So therefore, we're going to take it into the hands of either the state government, the federal government. I'm not sure which one is over that. And we will get them the help that they need. And it's such an important thing. And it really does tie so well into the initiative in Washington, D.C. Because why is Washington, D.C. dangerous? Obviously, crime, crime. And some of the people who commit those crimes are, of course, the homeless and the mentally ill. But more often than not, the homeless and the mentally ill are actually the victims of crime. More often than not, they are the victims of crime. And they're very vulnerable people, and that makes them very easy targets. So by tackling crime, not only are you assisting the people who are homeless, the people who are more vulnerable in your community, but because you're giving these criminals less victims, less people to choose from. And I think that again, we have to worry about next, well, where do the criminals go? Like we talked about yesterday, they're not going to just say, okay, I'm going to go get a job and I'm going to stop robbing and carjacking people. I'm just going to lay down my gun. I'm going to stop shooting people over territorial wars and all this other stuff. That's not going to happen. They're just going to go somewhere else. So I was so glad that Donald Trump added that this is the first city. This is the first situation in Washington, D.C., but from there, it could potentially happen in Chicago or Los Angeles. He named a number of different cities. And I know that he pays special attention to St. Louis because St. Louis, of course, is what are like the number one murder capital per capita of course, the United States. So St. Louis has always been on Donald Trump's mind when it comes to crime. Therefore, I do think we'll see some local federal action. And we've had these multi-agency task force working in St. Louis and around the country already, under Donald Trump's term, the last term and this term. So that will continue. But people are freaking out. I haven't even seen all the Democrat statements yet because, of course, in their mind, oh my God, Donald Trump's taking over Washington, D.C. And of course, oh, it's a coup. We're not going to have an election in 2028. And oh, he's just doing this as a civil war. A lot of other people thinking, and this one I understand a little bit more, that it's preparation for all these indictments that are going to happen. Kind of remember when Democrats sealed off the White House and the Capitol building, they put those fences up, and we're all like, what in the world is going on? Why are they doing this? And they're like, oh, it's construction. And we're all thinking, what are they up to? They're always up to something. And now it's kind of the sides have flipped. Everybody thinks Donald Trump's up to something. Now, I personally do think he's just tackling violent crime. I do not think this is preparation for any type of indictments. I really don't. Pam says, take some of these abandoned buildings. We have plenty of them across the country. Similar to the ICE housing, but with assistance, shelter, and help. Pam, I agree. I don't know what we can do about those abandoned buildings, but there are abandoned homes all across the country. We see them, just as a local example in St. Louis. And it's not necessary, while there are more of them in St. Louis City, they're even out in the county. And we know that these houses are used to commit crimes. Police find bodies in these houses quite often. Sometimes people who are trying to hide from police from serious crimes will hide in these abandoned houses. I just read a story. It's so funny you say that, Pam. I just read a story last night about a criminal who did some really horrific, brutal things to this couple that got lost, that they found. I'm not going to talk about that because it was one of the most horrific cases I've ever come across. And this guy was on the run because he knew that police had been to his house. They found, one of the bodies. And where did he go? He went and hid in an abandoned house, and he had hidden there for quite some time before finally a witness came forward and said where he was. They may have never found him. We don't have enough law enforcement to patrol all of these abandoned houses, and a lot of times they're used for drugs. A lot of drug addicts and drug dealers frequent these houses, and to me, that's like one of the number one steps that we have to do if we want to get back to making America great again. We've got to get rid of these houses. If they're dilapidated, then they need to be torn down. If they're just empty for any other reason, then you know what? They need to be sold for pennies on the dollar, or the government, instead of sending billions upon billions of dollars, renting out entire hotels or giving these people $20,000, $30,000 so they can purchase a home. Rehab these houses, rehab the houses. And Lori says, or all of the malls that are ghost towns. I know, Lori. Same thing, exactly that. We know here again in the St. Louis area how many malls have closed and they're dilapidated. They're just sitting there. They're empty. I've seen countless videos of various shopping malls that have been closed for years. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with them structurally. There's just no other businesses that want to take them over or take on, such a large structure. So therefore, they're just empty. Now, there's different companies that come around and they try to, make it into something else but think about that. A mall is huge. Look at the Mills. If you're here in the St. Louis area, look at the Mills. Now they have hockey, like a hockey rink out there where I don't know if the Blues still practice out there, but they did at one time. No, that's right. Now they're at Centene, but at one time they practiced out there. They put in like this go-kart track. I mean, it's usually big things that not every company is capable of doing. And I want an idea I heard a long time ago, which I still think is a fantastic idea, and I've heard it implemented in a couple of different places, is turning them into retirement homes. But why not turn them into a facility to house illegals while we're transporting them here or there? Of course, Donald Trump's goal is to get them out as fast as he possibly can. And so I guess he's just setting up tents where he can to try to get that taken care of. But we'll see how it all plays out, because I don't know what's going to happen in Washington, D.C., but I do hope that the mission is highly successful. We're going to find out, of course, what the National Guard, what they're able to do. Probably, again, just a deterrent, just a show of force, just to kind of back up local law enforcement, federal law enforcement. And I know the mayor there, what's her name? Bowser? I can't remember her first name. She is very upset because she does not want Donald Trump or the federal authorities to take over Washington, D.C. But you know what? Under this 1973 Home Rule Act, she has no choice, because it is a law that when crime has become so rampant that the government is allowed to step in. And I really wish that other presidents in the past had enacted the same law and went into various cities across the United States, because if they had, we wouldn't be in the situation that we're in right now. I've gotten so desensitized to homicides, carjackings, other serious offenses that I don't even think about them anymore. I used to report on them all the time. I remember back in 2012, 2013, I had a show and I would talk about local homicides all the time. And I would interview, sometimes the parents and family members. And you know what? There's too many of them now. There's too many. Just this morning, I don't generally look on Facebook before the show because I'm too busy getting ready. But this morning I did. And usually it's after the show. But every time I do, I see, guess what? In St. Louis City, another homicide, another carjacking, another police chase, another shots fired at police, bodies being found in different areas. It's such a daily occurrence that I don't even think about it anymore. I don't even think about it anymore. And you probably don't either. And it's sad, really, that we're so used to it that it doesn't matter anymore because it's just a matter of fact. We just talked yesterday about grocery stores, how grocery stores sometimes aren't safe, how it's difficult to feel safe going anywhere, these days, and how I was so glad to have grown up in the 80s and the 90s where things actually did feel safe. And that's just not the case anymore. And it's really sad. And it's really unfortunate that that's the case. Lori said a surgery center went into her local mall. Yeah, I've heard a lot of reports that the Galleria, if you're here in the St. Louis City, that the Galleria is eventually going to be turned into upscale housing and some specialty retail shops. I don't know if that's going to be true. It's one of the last malls around, in the St. Louis area that seems busy and continually operating. But, there's not much profit in running a shopping mall anymore. So, story for another day, of course. But I did want to make sure we talked about that. A lot going on again with the hacking in Washington, D.C. At the federal court level. So we don't know who the hackers are. We don't know what materials that they were able to see. We can only assume that they were able to see this witness testimony. And I'm seeing a lot of things come into play. Now, the hacking took place on August the 6th, so that was a few days ago. Now, I don't know if this is related or not, but I did see that federal authorities, the Counterterrorism Task Force, as well as special operations, guess what they're doing? They're in Texas and they're guarding Ghislaine Maxwell. And I don't know if that's because of this hack. Maybe they know that these hackers were in there and they got some of the Epstein information. They know what her testimony is, and they know that she literally has the names. They're right there in her head. She has the names. So was that part of the hack? I know people say, well, there was a lot of witness testimony. I'm going to talk to you about Adam Schiff here in just a second. But I think that's interesting about Maxwell. Now, on a side note, Thomas Massie, as you guys may or may not know, he has gathered the various victims of Epstein because Thomas Massie is not going to let it go. He is absolutely not going to allow it to be swept under the rug. And of course, Pam Bondi, Donald Trump, trying to get those records released. And of course, the federal court said, nope, we're not going to do that. We are not going to release these sealed files to you. So if someone hacked into the system, they can probably see these sealed files. And is that the reason why we're stepping up these security efforts for Maxwell? I don't know. Is it because she's about to give testimony and they're worried that something could happen to her if she does give testimony? Now, I don't know what you guys think, and I don't care if you think I'm wearing my tinfoil hat today. I will always believe that Epstein, if indeed it was him that was, I got to be careful, unalived. I got to be careful what I say. If it was truly Epstein that was unalived, I absolutely do believe. I don't believe that he hung himself. I do not believe it. I absolutely do believe that someone came in during that little pause we may see on the videotape. And by the way, that video that was circulating showing the cell of his door, that was not even his cell. So you see the video and you see this door like off to the right side. That was not Epstein's cell. That's some random person's cell. We don't even know whose cell that is. Epstein's cell, if you take where that camera was and you look down over the banister, completely out of view is where his cell was. So from that camera angle, I don't even know why that was circulating because that proved absolutely nothing. At one point you can see them escorting Epstein back towards that area where his cell is. You see him pass through very briefly, but on that camera angle, you could not see his cell. You couldn't see anyone coming in or out of that cell. So it proved absolutely nothing. Nothing. We already know from a long time ago that the security guards at the time, I remember it clear as can be from talking about it, that they said very clearly that they took a nap. Remember that? Remember, oh, they took a nap. It just happened to be taking a nap when Epstein, and all of a sudden, all of that's gone. No one talks about that anymore. That these these guys said that they took a nap makes no sense at all. I will never believe that that was his body, or if it was his body, that he did that to himself. So now let's fast forward to Maxwell sitting right now in a Texas prison because we know they just moved her. So they moved her to this prison in Texas that is very minimum security. So what happens at a minimum security prison? It's a lot easier for people to get in and out, isn't it? It's open to family visits. She can have family visit her. There's a lot of it's definitely a more posh prison than where she once was. But at the same time, it is a minimum security prison, which means that people can come in and out a little bit more easily. It's still prison, it's not like people can come in and not be detected, but we know how these things work. We know how the CIA operates. And I think we all know, that her life is absolutely in danger because we know that they were told anyway that some of these names would cripple our economy if we found out who they were. I don't know if that's true because we know that Bill Clinton went, 38 times, and no one seems to care. As a matter of fact, Democrats still support him. And Vernon says, sounds like you were describing Portland, Oregon as far as crime. And Vernon and so many other cities across the United States, so many other cities. Sherry says, minimum security is way more dangerous. They can get you many ways over. Exactly, Sherry, exactly. And it makes you wonder, did they move her to a minimum security prison so that she's more accessible to people who may want to cause her harm? So I'm sure Donald Trump is like, wait a minute, we need to make sure we protect our asset. And so that is why they have likely have the counterterrorism task force, as well as other federal authorities, special operations forces guarding Maxwell in that Texas prison. And so going back to that leak, a lot of witness testimony. So the Epstein files is one possibility. What these hackers may have uncovered. They could have uncovered other witnesses. I'm going to read something to you, and it's kind of interesting. The tie to St. Louis. Now, we could all guess and assume who this whistleblower is, but we just don't know because the St. Louis area is central to so many different things. I was talking to someone yesterday about the business that I do. I work in anti-piracy, we're working film security, but we also do personal protection for talent, for the films that we work on. And everybody's like, well, why does Tom Cruise in St. Louis? Why is Will Ferrell or Mark Wahlberg or Will Smith? Why are these people in St. Louis? Because St. Louis is very central. And so it's a good neutral place for people to come to. So there's a lot of different celebrities that come through St. Louis. There's a lot of different government officials that come through St. Louis. I met Donald Trump in St. Louis, believe it or not, in the year 2000 when I was doing some campaigning for him. They allowed me to come up and meet Donald Trump and present him with a Trump 2000 button when he talked about running for president in the year 2000. So there's a lot that happens in the city of St. Louis. And so I want to read this to you because I think Adam Schiff, he's going to be the first head to roll. There's no question about it. Now, there's a whistleblower that came forward. I don't know if you've read or have already seen this testimony that came forward. So Adam Schiff is definitely on the line. He will probably be the first to go in. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if they didn't have the cabal, the shadow government, whatever you may have them, may have. We're going to turn that around too. What if it was Donald Trump that ordered the hacking? We'll talk about that in a second. But what if it was somebody trying to find out who this whistleblower is or who the other witnesses are? So this is the whistleblower testimony, and it's pretty crazy. Now, this is from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. This date of entry was, let's see here, June 28th of 2023. And your head's going to be reeling like mine, like, who is it? And some of you may guess, I don't know. But a lot of this has been redacted. I will read the part that's not redacted. And it says blank, redacted, was interviewed at the Marriott St. Louis Grand Hotel. We've all been there, located at 800 Washington Avenue, St. Louis, Missouri, by special agents. And it says the identity of the interviewing agents and the nature of the interview provided the following information. A lot of this, again, being redacted. Blank, redacted, previously had a positive experience working with the Federal Bureau of Investigations related to incidents in 2017 that occurred when Redacted worked on the United States U.S. House of Representatives Permanent Select Committee. So this is somebody who worked on the Permanent Select Committee and on intelligence, the Intelligence Committee. In this position, Redacted worked with senior political leaders from both major political parties, including Congressman Adam Schiff and former Congressman Devin Nunes. And Redacted was friends with both Schiff and Nunes. So probably somebody who is a Democrat. When working in this capacity, Redacted was called to an all-staff meeting by Schiff. In this meeting, Schiff stated the group would leak classified information which was derogatory to President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. Schiff stated the information would be used to indict President Trump. Redacted stated that this would be illegal. And upon hearing his concern, unnamed members of the meeting reassured Redacted that they would not be caught leaking classified information. And Redacted was again approached about leaking classified information in a separate meeting by unnamed individuals. Redacted believed this activity to be unethical and treasonous. Redacted was concerned about the discussion and as a result reached out to contacts from his prior blank blank redacted employment for guidance on where to report this experience. These discussions led Redacted to contact the FBI regarding his concerns. Redacted had several conversations with two unnamed FBI agents related to the matter and was eventually invited to attend a mock indictment. So it goes from there, and we don't know who is the whistleblower. Somebody who worked on the committee, on those two committees, the Intelligence Committee and what was the other committee? Let's see here. Two different, the Permanent Select Committee and the Intelligence Committee. And this person was friends with Schiff and Nunes. So who could this person possibly be? And it's not, I'm not talking about it so we can guess who it was, quite honestly. But we know that this information is there. That is direct testimony under oath from a whistleblower who claims that Adam Schiff directly discussed with the entire group of people that they were going to take information to harm Donald Trump and to, put this indictment forward, information that they knew was not true. And that is absolutely treasonous. And whoever this person is, I would like to thank them for being an honest person in coming forward. Now, here's the problem. Because of this Supreme Court leak, the name of this person was likely leaked in that information. And along with a lot of other witnesses and people who have come forward against the likes of Obama or the Bidens or Pelosi or again, Schiff and any of these others, Comey, Brennan, the list goes on. And so that is why I can see the cabal, the deep state, whoever you want to call them, being behind this hack. Because of course they want to know who these witnesses are. Whoever this redacted person is that we just talked about, they're obviously probably very fearful right now. And we know that if, of course, the Trump administration reaches out to this person and tries to reassure them, but the fact is if you were this witness, you were this whistleblower, you wouldn't be able to sleep at night, would you? You'd be worried constantly that somebody's going to take you out in the middle of the night, or who knows what. So that's one side of the story, is that it could be Democrats, somebody in the deep state government going back and trying to find out who these whistleblowers, who they are, so that these indictments never move forward. Because if you think about the Democrat Party as a regime, not a political party, then they're capable of doing anything. And that includes unaliving potential witnesses. Now, on the flip side of that, a lot of people think, well, what if it was Donald Trump? What if he was behind the hack that he hired? Of course, our government has some really great hackers. That what if these people are the ones going in and trying to get information on the Epstein files? Because obviously they will not release these Epstein files to us. And so therefore, Donald Trump may want to know, okay, well, what's really in those files? I think one of you brought that up yesterday about that potential option. And it is a possibility, but I don't really think so. I would be very shocked if I heard that it was Donald Trump behind the leaking of those files. Beyond shocked. Because I think he would realize the ramifications if he were found out. And I hate to say it, but the circle of people that he can trust is so small that if he were behind this type of hacking, somebody would probably already be talking about it. So I think that I do personally think that the protection against Ghislaine Maxwell right now in her Texas prison is because of the leak, and because of the fact that she does know the names, and the fact that Thomas Massie is all over this situation, the fact that America is all over the situation. They know we want to know those names. And there's a lot of talk about her giving testimony and naming those names. Allegedly, she's already named 100 names to the government. So whether that's true, I don't know, but that's what we're told. And so she's obviously under protection for good reason. But what about the other folks? This whistleblower we just talked about, are they going to be under federal protection as well? It's pretty interesting because you know and I know that whoever this whistleblower is, he sees the same stuff we see. And this person knows now that their statement is out there, their testimony is out there. And you know, by just reading those words that we read, if you were Adam Schiff or if you were one of these people in this meeting, you would know exactly who that whistleblower is, wouldn't you? So we'll see how that works out. Good morning, Michelle. Interesting, of course, as always, with this hacking situation. And we'll see again how it plays out from day to day. You know, something else I wanted to talk about today, outside of all of that, there's so many things to talk about, was the indictments. Taken a little bit further, everybody says, well, they're not going to be able to indict Obama because of the fact that he has immunity. It's like, why indict him if he has immunity? He can't be prosecuted. But JD Vance made some interesting statements the other day. We barely touched base on it yesterday, where he said there will be indictments. There will be indictments. There will be many indictments. And, I would think that I don't know what you think about JD Vance, but to me, he does not seem like someone who's just throwing things out there without things to back it up. There are things that he knows, case files that he has seen, to lead him to believe that indictments are going to occur. And I absolutely agree with him that that's going to happen. But who is it going to be? Schiff, that one's going to be pretty obvious. Comey, probably obvious. Brennan, probably obvious. Now, indictments, as we know, is different than A, facing charges, B, being convicted. So being indicted is great as that will be, a very momentous occasion for us all after we saw what they did to Donald Trump and ran him through the ringer, of course, with all these ridiculous indictments. And Democrats are going to say the same thing. Let's just go straight to the top and say that they indict Obama. I could see maybe him being indicted. I don't see it going any further. I don't even see any of these cases going to conviction, quite honestly. But we'll see what, when the time comes. But let's just say they do indict Obama. I think I will have the biggest smile on my face. I will be laughing the entire time. And it's not about Obama. It's just the fact that Democrats have always thought they could get away with it. They laughed when Donald Trump was indicted, when they tried to bankrupt him, when they tried to imprison him, when they ruined his reputation. For God's sakes, I still see people posting photos of a little Ivanka sitting on, is it Ivana sitting on his lap. She's like 12 years old. And people are like, oh, what a pervert. I'm like, okay, she's 12 years old. That's his daughter sitting on her dad's lap, giving him a kiss on the cheeks. I mean, isn't that what every parent does? But when it's Donald Trump, it's like, oh no, can't have that. But then when you mention Joe Biden taking showers with his daughter, which we read in her diary excerpt, that she ended up in a life of drugs and other, violence perpetrated against her because she felt over-sexualized because her father took showers with her when she was a naked teen. I mean, come on. What a flip side, right? And Abe says Obama only has immunity for official acts. Springs, not an official act. I'm not sure what you mean by Springs, not an official act. And that's a good way to look at it, Abe. I need to do some more research on what his immunity is. I always just take everybody's word for it. But I'm going to look into that and see what an indictment could be. I just don't see anything happening to the likes of Obama or the Clintons. And I think that's why Donald Trump didn't go after either one of them the last time. Obama, I think he's very careful what he does. The Clintons don't care. Everything they've ever done is just wide out in the open. They don't even try to hide it. And oh, spying. So Obama only has immunity for official acts. Spying is not an official act. Well, I could see where he could maybe twist it to say that it was official, but I would like to see him indicted because I would like to read everything there is. Because, we're getting little tidbits here and there about different reasons why they could indict him, but we don't know everything. I would like to see all those files. I would like to see it play out. I would like to see not only them indict all of these names that we've talked about, but I would also like to see lawsuits filed, civil suits. They sued Donald Trump, what was it, $460 million? Is that what it was in a civil suit? I would like to see civil suits against all of these people. Let's bankrupt them in the same way they tried to bankrupt Donald Trump. Now, all of these people have houses in Washington, D.C., right? So that gives also a little bit more authority over search warrants or over other types of surveillance. So keep that in mind also. Now, speaking of Democrats, very quickly, I know we don't have a whole lot of time left. I want to talk a little bit, if anything crazy is going to happen, it's going to happen in California, right? Or Florida. Florida's got its issues also. And I love both states. It's just a shame. Florida deals with the crazy crime, homelessness, and drug addiction. And then we have California with the same issues, but they've got Gavin Newsom dealing with everything over there. Speaking of Florida, we'll talk about this tomorrow. I haven't heard a peep, not a single peep. And you probably haven't either out of DeSantis. If you guys recall, he was featured in Donald Trump's video, basically alluding to these are the people who did me wrong and how he was going to get back at them. And I haven't heard anything out of DeSantis since the very beginning when we started about ICE and ICE raids. Haven't heard a peep out of him since then. I don't know what he's got going on over there in Florida. Thankfully, he seems to be doing a good job. Now, on the flip side, we have California with Governor Newsom. And now there's this big story out. I'm going to play a very short video where he has cut off the water. Think about that, irrigation water to farmers and ranchers. Now, how are farmers and ranchers going to grow crops and grow food if they don't have irrigation water? So I'm just going to play this quick video for you, and then we're going to talk about this for just a second. Then I got a couple other things to talk about.
Oh, we just found out we're not going to be able to get any irrigation water, which shuts us down as ranchers.
We're just kind of looking at just having to go out of business, because that's what we do here is raise cattle. And if we don't have any water, that's going to be taken away from us.
Well, will go dry.
What do you do here?
What do you do with dry land that you can't grow anything on? We're all going to have to go out of business.
That is such a shame, isn't it? That is such a shame. And I'm hearing not only is that happening, but there are various areas of the country where ranchers are dealing with so many other issues. Democrat governors try to stop ranchers in any way they possibly can. I've also heard stories coming out of California where some ranches are being taken from eminent domain, which is also just absolutely ridiculous. Ranches that have been in families for multiple generations being attacked. Now, what's funny about that is California always is the first to say, excuse me, that you can't deport all the illegals in our country, the migrants, because they're the ones working the fields. How are we going to have any crops if we don't have people working the fields? But let's cut the irrigation water off to all of these ranchers and all of these farms so that they can't grow crops and feed cattle and other livestock. It's absolutely crazy. But what would you expect, of course, coming from the state of California? And Pam says, why would the governor do that? It's about conservation, Pam. And this has been talked about many times before in the state of California, is that they're all about conserving water. As you probably know, they want you, if you live there, they tell you to conserve water. Don't take a shower, take your dry shower, only wash the necessary parts and don't run water in your shower or your bathtub. And it's part of that same sense. They want to conserve water. So they're cutting off the water channels to these different ranches and farms. And it's nothing necessarily new that they've wanted to do this, but now they're actually doing it. So I hope that these farmers, have some action. I hope somebody steps up, hopefully on a federal level, and says, "Hey, Newsom, you cannot do this. You can't do it. You can't take away people's livelihood, and not only that, but stop that food chain in its tracks." So we'll follow up with that story as I hear a little bit more, because that's really important to me. I'm always all about farmers, ranchers, of course, because they are growing the real food, not the dangerous food. Speaking of that, of course, in California, they want to stop people from having livestock. They want to stop people from growing real food because they want to give us all this GMO nonsense. I just saw something from Bill Gates yesterday, and it's nothing new. This has been around for a long time. We've talked about cellular based meats before, cellular based dairy, but I was reading a report yesterday when he was out touting the cellular made butter. I mean, when you look at it, it's like the process they have to go through to make this fake butter off of the cells of a couple of animals is a way more processed food than actual real butter could ever be. But of course, it cuts down on greenhouse gases if we force everybody to eat this cellular based butter over my dead body. Will I be eating cricket flour, or cellular based meat or cellular based butter? Not going to happen in my lifetime, or any other cellular based food. Not going to happen. And Donna says, all about control, make the poor poorer. That's exactly, Donna. I would think almost every law Democrats come up with is exactly about that, to make the poor poorer. But yet the poor and the poorer continue to vote Democrats into office. It's like a brain cycle they just can't break from, that I will never understand. Pam says there should be a better way. There always is a better way. There's always a better way. But you know what? They always want to be very drastic. Just like in California, it was one of the first areas to say, well, all new home construction cannot have natural gas. Don't even put a natural gas line into a house because they want everything to be electric. But then they say, oh, well, we can't support all that electric. We're going to have rolling blackouts. I think it was it Maine? I wasn't planning on talking about this today, but I think it was Maine that announced yesterday that the same type of situation, that they are so stressed, their power grid, that they are expecting blackouts to occur. And I'm like, why are we trying to force everybody to use electric if we know that our grid cannot support all the electric use? Because why? Because they want us to have rolling blackouts. They want us to be able to sit around in the dark. No question about it. Don't ever think it's any different. I wanted to throw this in there really. Oh, Pam says, California is ate up weirdos. Most of it. I got very lucky when I was in California. I was in Orange County, and there it's a very large conservative area, and the people there were absolutely fantastic. And of course, the people in other parts of California call them Nazis, which I think was kind of funny. Adrian, there's no way to have continuous cell line substrate without it being tumorigenic cells. And Adrian, that is way beyond me. I'm not even sure what that means. But please send me something and explain it to me, and we'll talk about it tomorrow. And I'm not sure what that means. And so anyway, so one thing I wanted to talk about was the tariffs, of course. In China, we keep touting these tariffs against these different companies and different countries and companies. And we have once again, Donald Trump has paused the tariffs against China for another 90 days. I would like to know why we keep giving them a break. Why do we keep giving them a break? And in the meantime, even though we're giving them that 90-day pause, all of these companies who make their products in China are warning Americans that the prices are getting ready to go up. Procter and Gamble, we all buy stuff from Procter and Gamble, don't we? A lot of these different places that make your toilet paper and your toothpaste and your soaps and detergents and other, body care products, hair care products, necessities you use around your home, your medical equipment, medical supplies, medications. They're all saying these prices are going to go up because they're going to reflect these tariffs. Now, will they backtrack now that we're telling them that China has another 90 days? I don't know. But what I do know is there's a whole list of companies out there who are telling us that we're going to be jacking up your prices. Whether you like it or not, it's going to happen. So that's a little bit worrisome to me. And there's not really a whole lot else going on. I know they're going to be challenging same-sex marriages. The Trump administration is trying to overturn same-sex marriage rule. I don't expect that to go anywhere. And quite honestly, it's a law that I don't have an issue with. I don't have any problem with same sex marriages. If people want to talk about the religious aspect, to me, that's between them and God. It's not for me to judge what other people do. And so I will see how that turns out. I don't expect any court to overturn the same sex marriage rule. Donna says, thought Kennedy was shooting for clean food. He is, absolutely. But the way I see it is I see Kennedy and Gates going toe to toe. However, I just read something the other day and I haven't really had time to get into it very well, is that Robert Kennedy is pushing for a universal vaccine. And I don't know what that's all about and what the vaccine is necessarily for. I don't know if it's a universal vaccine, meaning that it covers a lot of different things universally, or universal meaning everyone universally needs to get it. I didn't have time to really look into it too far, but I did see some of the legislation about this vaccine that Kennedy is putting out there. And it could be that it's maybe a safe vaccine where it doesn't have all these heavy metals and different dangerous chemicals in it. I don't know, but something I'm definitely going to look into and find out a little bit more about it. But I think that somebody like Bill Gates, he's like off in his own world, his own little bubble, no question about it. And I don't know where. I think maybe he just doesn't sleep. I don't know. He just doesn't sleep, and he just sits around in this manic phase, thinking, what can I do with all my money? Oh, I can create fake mosquitoes. We can get rid of the Zika. I think he intends well. I really do. I think his intentions are good. I don't think that he's doing this to be a monster. I know you guys are going to disagree with me, and that's okay. I don't think Bill Gates is doing this stuff to be a monster. But I think that in his head, in this manic state he's probably already always in, he's probably just constantly thinking, how can I get rid of Zika virus? Well, the way to get rid of Zika virus is to change the DNA in mosquitoes, or how can we stop the earth from being so darn hot? Oh, gee, we're just going to go send these chemicals up and block the sun. How can we help people the most? We're going to give them these mRNA vaccines. It's like, how are we going to stop greenhouse gases because we're killing our planet? He's like at the ultimate, conservationist when it comes to climate change. And he's like, how do we get rid of greenhouse gases? Well, we got to get rid of meat. We got to get rid of cows, and we got to get rid of pork. We got to get rid of chickens and other livestock. And then somebody on his committee said, well, then what about the people? What are we going to eat if we don't have any livestock? Oh, well, we'll take 2 cells off of a cow and we'll put it in a Petri dish and put it through this fermentation process. It'll grow, and we're just going to grow our own meat. It's the craziest thing. And then sometimes I think maybe there's somebody, maybe aliens have come back and said, hey, Bill Gates, this is how we eat. We go down to Earth and we extract some cow cells and we come back up into space and we grow our meats, which a lot of people have said is actually true about why farmers sometimes find their livestock, drained of blood, because it's the aliens coming down, taking their blood to go back up into space to create more meat. And then some people say that Bill Gates, these are some crazy hypothetical situations that I hear out on these dark websites that I read about news, because there's a lot of good information out there, but kind of going down the rabbit hole. A lot of people think that Bill Gates is very successful, not maybe in our lifetimes, but somewhere down the line, where Earth is so incredibly populated, there's no more land for animals and livestock. And these ideas of Bill Gates really take off with this cellular-based meat. And as humans continue to evolve down the line, let's say many centuries from now, we continue with our technology, and eventually humans evolve into what our modern day extraterrestrials look like. And that is how they eat. And they're able to time travel, come back to Earth, get some more cow cells, go back up into their home in space and grow more meat to feed their populations. That's a deep, dark rabbit hole. But that is a theory that does float out there in the dark web spaces. And let's see here. Dee says, all Gates ever wants to do is depopulate. Look into who his father is. He's a very evil man. Dee, I know I said I don't think, I think that in his brain, he thinks he's saving humanity. And by saving humanity, that means depopulation. Yes, he is absolutely an evil person. Not only that, but look at we don't know what he did on Epstein Island or what he did in his hanging out with Epstein. I think we can all guess what he did. And yes, he is 100% probably one of the most evil people in our lifetimes that we will ever come across. But I still think in his mind, he thinks he's helping people. He sees it as the earth cannot continue at the rate we're at with population. So let's depopulate the earth so that the other future humans can survive. And so yes, I absolutely agree. He's trying to depopulate the earth. I absolutely believe that his crazy science experiments are killing Americans and making the situation so much worse. If they continue to allow him to conduct these crazy research experiments, and they're already doing it. They're already doing it. He and his researchers have already put chemicals up into the atmosphere to block the sun. And it's so much more. People say, well, that happens already with cloud seeding and chemtrails. That's what chemtrails do. They block the sun. And that's absolutely 100% true, in my opinion. And I do think that he has a big hand in all of those things. But they have already in California allowed Bill Gates and his researchers to put these chemicals in there to block the sun. It was outed, they were caught. I didn't even talk about it. It was like a month ago I read the story. And Donna says, goes against God. Yes. Peggy says, are you okay with pedophilia? No. That's why I said he is absolutely evil. In our retrospect of looking at him, probably one of the evilest people on the planet. But I don't think in his mind he sees it that way, is what I mean. I think in his mind, he thinks he's doing this great service to humanity. But really, he's like this manic person that, in my opinion, needs to be locked up and never see the light of day again. And I hope when all these Epstein files come out, the people who follow him and these researchers, that will get a good understanding of what he's really about. That yes, he may think he's doing good, and he thinks his little experiments on humanity are for the better, of the world. But then they find out what his true nature is. And let's see. Dottie, South Africa is his laboratory. Yes, I mean, absolutely. And, we probably are too, in ways that we don't even know. And David says liberals prefer the disgraceful, dangerous, filthy, unlivable status quo because they are opposed to anything Trump does to make America safer again. David, you couldn't be more correct. And it comes, look at crime. Look at Maxine Waters in the video I played earlier, standing right there in Washington, D.C., with the sirens behind her, talking about how Donald Trump wants civil war. It's like the craziest thing ever, and how he just wants to take control. No, he wants to end crime. And shouldn't everyone want to end crime? And look at every Democrat-led city, the highest crime rates, right? In all of the Democrat-led cities. It's a fact that you cannot deny and you cannot dispute. What is very common in Democrat-led cities? Homelessness, mental health situations, drug addiction, crime, absolutely rampant in Democrat-led cities. Why? Because they don't care. They do not care about humanity. They do not care about these people at all. If they did, they would find a solution like Donald Trump is trying to do. And one of you said earlier, Donald Trump, I think it was you, Pam, the first president ever to come up with legislation to actually help the homeless and the mentally ill and the drug addicts. The first president to do that. And it's about darn time, isn't it? But Democrats don't care. You know what Democrats care about? They care about that you get off your butt today and go into work so that you can be generating income to line their pockets with, so that you can go out and work and get that little bit of a illusion of freedom that you're able and choose where you want to work, and you can choose what kind of car you want to drive. You can choose what house you live in. But in the meantime, all they want is their grubby little hands to get on all your money, those tax dollars, so that they can use it to create more wealth for themselves, not for the country, but for themselves. Because whether you not really realize it or not, we live in a third world country. Our infrastructure is so old. Even in war-torn Ukraine, their gas stations are 1,000 times better than any gas stations we have here in the United States. Look at the grocery stores in Europe. Even the Aldi in Europe is a bazillion times better than any Aldi we have here in the United States. Our infrastructure is run down, absolutely run down. And even some of the new architecture is old school. We're not moving forward. We're not progressing when it comes to our infrastructure. Donna says, have you ever seen the count of how many satellites there are? I wonder if that interferes with our climate. It could. Yeah, I have seen it. And that's the only thing about Elon Musk that I kind of have an issue with. I understand why Elon Musk is doing what he's doing. He's putting all these satellites into orbit. And and you have to remember that, or that area up there is vast. I mean, it's amazingly vast. But at the same time, I would think that those satellites would affect our climate to some degree, or affect our atmosphere, affect us in some way. And especially when it comes to the signals. I was watching some videos about 5G towers and how animals stay away from 5G towers, and how, you know, the radio signals that it emits are so dangerous for us. And I was even reading an article over the weekend that I've not talked about, and it talked about how most Americans, or really most people in the world, have no idea what silence is. And particularly in countries like the United States, or much of Europe, we don't know what real silence is, because we don't even know it. We don't even know, but Wi-Fi emits such a noise that we don't even know what's happening. And the 5G towers emit a sound that we don't even recognize or hear. And they talk about how if you go out to the wilderness, which these days it's very difficult to find a spot in the wilderness where there's no cell phone tower, there's no 5G, radio waves, there's no radio, there's nothing that can be emitted there. What a difference it makes in your body. And that we're making ourselves sick, because we're all of these waves, radio waves, that are being emitted all around us, all these different frequencies are affecting our well-being. And that's why people are becoming sick. And they talk about how we don't know what it's like to have real silence, because they say unless you go somewhere, again, it's not as easy as just going around your house and unplugging your Wi-Fi, although that helps. It's still, you have to go somewhere where there's absolutely no electricity at all, no signal at all, to truly heal your body. It was a pretty interesting article that I read. And so that's something I think to think about, how we can get rid of these things. Donna says 11,700 satellites. That's a lot. Now, if you think about outer space and in the orbit around the Earth, that they're pretty spread out. And I know Elon Musk, his goal is to provide communication to the entire world. That's his goal. And of course, space travel and everything else. I'm assuming he's done his research to find out, does it affect us? But I don't know that it affects us any more than what we're doing right here on Earth. Without everybody, every house, has a Wi-Fi router, sometimes 2 or 3 Wi-Fi routers. You go to a business, there's several Wi-Fi routers. We have 5G towers on every block, all these different systems that all everywhere. If your eyes could see all of the radio waves, frequencies going on around you, it would probably blow your mind. And so something to think about, but I'm already 15 minutes over. I've got to go look for my niece's cat. But it was good seeing all of you today. Thank you so much for joining me. A lot more to talk about tomorrow. Hopefully we'll have Colonel Joe Adams joining us. I'll be reaching out to him after the show today. If not tomorrow, then hopefully on Friday or next week. Now, again, I will for sure have a show tomorrow. I'm going to be working in Springfield, Missouri the rest of the week. So I know for sure I won't have a show on Thursday, and I'm not sure yet about Friday, but I will keep everyone posted. Lots more to talk about. Lots going to be playing out this week, including the interest rates. We're going to keep an eye on what happens with the interest rates coming up. See if we get an idea of what's going to happen when I think that's actually next week when they're talking about the interest rates. Lots of things coming through financials this week as well. There's going to be a lot going on when we start learning about that debt ceiling. We talk about how of course, United States, we're 37 trillions in debt right now. Is that coming down? We're going to find out a lot of information this week. We can touch base on that on Friday, if in fact I can have a show. But I do hope you guys have a really good day. I'm Tabitha Hassell with Tabs on Tap. Thanks everybody for joining me, and enjoy your day.